This is a property, and we're going to talk through it in a minute, that you were able to buy and then undertake the works to, and then refinance to take back all of your existing capital.
The auctioneer approached me afterwards and said, what would you guys pay for it? And we said, look, I'll probably pay 60. So we had known going into it, if we created what we said we were going to create, it was basically going to come out at the £300,000 level.
This is Ant Lyons from Your Property Network magazine, and once again on the YouTube channel, or you might be watching on Facebook, we're talking to property investor and developer about a real life property deal. And I'm really pleased today to have on this recording with me a prolific property guy, someone who's out there doing an awful lot in property, and he's a regular contributor to the pages of YPN as well. So it's really nice to have him on here and to talk through just one of his many projects. So Saif Derzi of SDG Properties. Did I get that right?
Yeah, SDGB Properties, that's it.
SDGB Properties. It's amazing to have you on the call today. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks,
we're sweltering in this July heat as we record this.
It is quite hot, to be fair.
Isn't it? So, okay, so the project that we're going to talk through today, and we're going to have some images on the screen as well in a minute, I think epitomizes what many of us want to achieve when we come into property, when we've perhaps learned a little bit about property, and we start to understand what can be achieved if we get the deal right. Because this is a property, and we're going to talk through it in a minute, that you were able to buy and then undertake the works to, and then refinance to take back all of your existing capital, and in fact a little bit more in this instance, and to leave you with a property that has equity in it from day one and is tenanted and making a monthly rental profit of cash in the bank. So many people won't even know that that's possible to do that. They might be coming to us thinking life property means taking a load of money that I've got somewhere and leaving it in a property to get a return, but that's not what we're talking about. So just a little bit about you. So you are a prolific investor and developer. This is one in your rental portfolio, but you buy, sell and trade properties as well. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. So predominantly we would, so we've got a property investment company, which is SDGB. And I think we were just talking about sort of from an investment point of view, that's something that really just ticks along every single year. We try and obviously compound a lot of that from an investment point of view and try and add as much as possible into that portfolio. But day to day, so my day to day is mainly trading. So we would buy and sell properties via auction. We would buy, develop and sell properties into the open market. And that's what we do as a day-to-day trading activity. And then as a bolt-on to that, we've got the lettings company, which basically just helps to manage the properties from SDGB Properties, plus manages other people's properties as well. So it's a general lettings agency up and down the country. And that really was born out of the frustration of not being able to find a really good letting agent, as most businesses, it's born out of frustration. So we've managed to have this remote management system where we can manage properties up and down the country, and we can offer a service where people weren't getting it necessarily before from a managing agent. So yeah, that's sort of a bit about me and the businesses that I run day to day.
Okay, fantastic. So let's talk about this particular property. So this is, can you tell us what it is, where it is, and how you found it?
Sure. So this is located in a small market town, actually in Lincolnshire, called Market Raisin. So it came onto my radar originally because it went to auction. So the property was going to auction. It was owned and run by a charity. So basically the charity had it and was running it as offices upstairs. So they had basically sort of, I guess you can say, siloed off little offices and basically just rented them out. So a small amount of rent. I think there was a councillor in one, local councillors, and just local professionals, I think solicitors and accountants and things like that. Downstairs was offices, half of the property was offices, and the other half was basically a local charity shop. So they sort of ran it in pretty much, I guess you could say, a mishmash of shops, offices, etc., that they would basically rent out. And just as a charity, they're just trying to make money to cover their overheads, really. So the charity got to a point where it ran out of money as an organisation, and they decided that they were sat on this asset where they needed to realise the value of it. So what they were going to do is they were going to move into another office, pay pretty low rent, in all honesty. They don't have to pay business rates either, and then basically sell this and use that for cash flow. So that's the whole purpose. So it was taken to auction originally. I think it originally went to the open market at £200,000 plus as a general price. Wasn't many takers for it, and we're talking about back in 2019. 2019 was a totally different market than 2021 for various reasons, but there wasn't many takers. It then went into auction. It actually failed at auction, so we were going to bid on it, but we felt that there wasn't any bidders there. It was really quiet auction, so we thought, let it fail, and then we'll go and have a conversation after it fails. So it failed at auction with a guide price of 100,000. At that point, it managed the expectations of the charity because they realised that there wasn't no one available to buy it at that, so they thought that was maybe a bit too high. So the auctioneer approached me afterwards and said, "What would you guys pay for it?" And we said, "Look, I'll probably pay 60." And he said, "Look, it's too low. Let's try and find a realistic figure." So we ended up settling at 75,000. The building was in really good shape internally, in all honesty. It didn't need loads of work doing to it. But as you know, to create flats, there's a lot of infrastructure work. So whether that's fire, obviously sound as well. So you want to obviously have noise and cancellation in between. So there's a lot of infrastructure work, and then obviously we had to put new kitchens, bathroom, and infrastructure for that as well. So that's what we ended up doing. So we ended up going for permitted development. So we had no planning or anything like that. But we ended up going for permitted development. We got planning for 5 flats in there, plus a commercial unit on the ground floor at the front. And the reason was for that because it was in a parade of commercial shops. So they kind of wanted to retain an element of commercial within it.
Okay, and that was definitely the sort of path of least resistance from a planning perspective, keeping that commercial element there. Had you gone for an additional flat, probably would have been turned down, I'm assuming.
Exactly. I mean, I think we just didn't want to, we didn't want it to prolong or, take longer than we would want to. So I think we went for a middle ground, and I think that's what we always do. We try not to maximize every single thing because it will cause complications, but we try and get volume done. So in order to get volume done, you just got to run with the punches, basically. So if it is 5 flats, it's 5. It's not going to be 6. We're okay with that. But that being said, we actually ended up getting a dance studio that was moving out of a nearby building because there was a fire, I think, nearby. And they actually wanted to take the full ground floor on a commercial lease. And to us, it made sense because we didn't have to do any of the development downstairs. We didn't have to do any works to the downstairs, in all honesty. They were coming in, they were going to decorate it, paint it, do all of the rest of it. They actually used our contractors at the time and ended up paying us £800 basically on a 7-year, I think just under 7-year commercial lease on the whole ground floor. And then we only did 3 flats on the first floor.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, that's again an example of kind of rolling with what's presented to you and spotting an opportunity there to say, actually, this makes sense because we have a commercial tenant that wants to move in. Might have been more difficult. We just don't know with the retail side of things at the moment to find someone to take a shop front or whatever. So, okay, can you talk us through the figures on it? So you paid £75,000 for the building, which seems cheap when they originally wanted 200,000.
Yeah.
How much did you spend on the works, and what did it come out as sort of valued at the end?
Yeah, so just really roughly, we spent around £25,000 per unit. They are 1-bed / studios, but they obviously meet the minimum space requirements. I think I can't remember what it was at the time. I think it was 32 square meters potentially. So they do meet the minimum, but they were studios / 1-bed, if that makes sense. So they weren't, it didn't cost loads to refurb them as such. We project managed it, so we brought in trades, we project manage it, and it basically came up to roughly 25,000 per flat. So I think all in something like just over 76,000.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So you're in for sort of 150, 160,000 thereabouts at this point. And this is the bit I find really interesting on the sort of revaluation end of things, because as you say, it was a lot more of an uncertain market at this point. So did you have an idea of what this thing was going to be worth at the end of it?
Yeah, so when we got the valuation done at that point, in all honesty, we got it done on what the end value would be, what it will be worth now, and if it would be worth now, what would it be worth now on I think it was a 4-week completion, an 8-week completion, and a 12-week completion, because that obviously affects the value. So we had known going into it, if we created what we said we were going to create, it was basically going to come out at the £300,000 level. So yeah, we kind of had an inclination. Now, in all honesty, I think if we valued it in 2021, it would probably be a bit more. But we valued it back in basically 2019 / 2020. So that was the value that we went with at the time, and we just sort of ran with it. But yeah, as I said, it was we did have a bit of inflation, but even if we didn't, it's not an issue because it's a commercial asset, so you'll be valuing it a lot based on income. So what would be the income of the whole building, looking at a multiple, factoring in things like we have to pay some of the utilities for the communal areas and things like that, you know, maybe a bit of maintenance on the roof, etc. So we factored that in, and we can basically come out with a multiple.
So yeah, top tip, you know, it's definitely not done on a bricks and mortar valuation in the same way that a house or a flat would be. It's done on a commercial valuation where a multiplier is applied to the annual rent that's achievable. So and you know, top tip there, you need to have the right commercial finance broker in place. You know, your off-the-shelf mortgage broker probably isn't going to do that type of product. So okay, so on the refinance, I think this is the bit that a lot of people don't necessarily get. So you force the appreciation of the asset. It's worth a lot more than you paid for it in total to get it to that point. So when you refinance this one, you're actually able to take money back out of the deal, so cash out of the deal. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess realistically, what's going to be happening on the what happens on the front end doesn't really necessarily affect what happens on the back end, because what happens on the back end is it'll be taken in its own merit. So it doesn't matter if you bought it as an office building, it doesn't matter if you bought it as a retail building. It's what is it valued at today if I'm coming to value it for the bank. So the bank are looking at it as an asset on their balance sheet, and they're looking at if they have to dispose of it, what is it worth? From a risk perspective, what loan to value can they give on it as what value it's basically going to bring back. So it was valued at 300,000. Their risk basically appetite was at 75% at the time. And basically they came back to say, we're happy to give you 75% of the 300,000 specifically. So they'll basically release 225 from it. Now you could be in for 100 grand for all they care, or you could be in for 200 grand. From their point of view, they're releasing the money based on the asset that you're presenting to them. And obviously we were in, I think at the time, just under 160,000 all in, with a bit of cost on top, probably maybe 162, 163 roughly. And yeah, that's considering sort of legals and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, and so you're able to just cash out this deal, put some money in the bank, you know, for more projects. You've still got equity in the project, in the property, plenty of equity in it, and it's rented out. We've got the dance studio downstairs, the commercial unit there. And who are your tenants upstairs? What sort of tenant profile have you got upstairs?
A lot of it was single males or single females that basically had a local nearby job. To be honest, we created probably one of the best products in the area. So a lot of the standard one-bed flats just were very, very standard. The only reason we were able to create it was because we did everything from scratch, if that makes sense. So it makes sense to go the extra mile and spend, you get a lot of value for money at that point. Whereas if you're taking something that doesn't need all of that spending, you try and basically go the extra mile on it, sometimes it doesn't stack up. So it's best to always do this stuff when you are developing from scratch, if that makes sense. But yeah, we just created a really good product, and then I think we ended up renting them out, and they're currently rented at 425 per month per flat, and the market value is around 375, maybe 390 or 400 on a good day for a one-bed flat.
And having the best looking sort of a product at that price point or within that particular market is really essential to getting a decent quality tenant and keeping them in there and having sort of low hassle going forwards as well, I'm sure. And what does this do for you in terms of sitting in the portfolio and sort of monthly cash flow? What does this generate for you now?
Roughly, I think net figures, I mean, I'm just literally thinking off the top of my head at the minute. I think roughly it will be just under 2,000 a month in terms of net cash flow from the property. We've actually got this as a joint venture with two other people, and we're actually in the process of potentially, because we use that vehicle for another development project, which we've now finished and sold and everything. It just didn't make sense to have just one property in a company, and it's not easy to be able to buy at the minute. So we're currently in talks with them buying us out of that. So again, yes, it will mean we get a bit of capital, capital injection back into the business, but it means that they get to enjoy the property, with plenty of equity, and basically their profit becomes equity, if that makes sense. So essentially, they're going to be basically holding the asset. Their profit becomes the equity portion, and basically they can end up holding it. But for me, the only reason we're looking at doing that was just because my long-term goals don't don't necessarily align with everyone else's long-term goals. So with a JV, we generally tend not to keep stuff for longer than 5 or 10 years, for example. So yeah, and we didn't really intend to do this on a buy to rent basis. It was a buy and sell property, but we ended up renting out. So we just said, look, we can either go to market and sell it at 300, or you can effectively buy us out at the value of 300. So that was the only reason for it. But it's good for the listeners to understand that, even though it valued up at that, but it doesn't necessarily mean it necessarily aligns with what our goals are, what we're going to be doing at the time. So yeah, you can be flexible is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think talking to you, flexibility is absolutely paramount, isn't it? Particularly in the sort of trading property business as well. So, you said just now that you alluded to earlier on that this would probably sort of value a lot more in today's market.
Yes.
And we're in a very hot property market without a doubt. So could you just give a couple of sort of top tips of what people could do to find deals? They might be struggling to find projects when the market is as it is at the moment.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's funny when we do this, Ant, because it's only when you have to start to put your thoughts into paper or consciously start to think about it that you actually start to think, right, I've actually been doing this way, this way, so that's what I'm actually looking for. Because you don't always sit and say, this is my criteria and be strict with it. But when you get asked about it, you almost have to do that. So if I'd have to put my criteria on paper in terms of how to find a property, I'd be looking at stuff that is not attractive from an investor's point of view. So anything that's refurbed, ready, done, cash flowing from day one is probably not going to be, it's probably not going to be where you're going to find your value, if that makes sense. You need to be looking at the complete opposite of that. You need to be looking at derelict, non-cash flowing, empty commercial properties, for example, is a really, really good one. Anything that basically an investor can't look and say, this looks quite shiny, I'm interested to buy it, because what you then do is you're reverse engineering it. Now, you can have some listeners sometimes that just don't have the time, effort, or don't want to do that, and they want to buy the stuff that's ready and cash flowing, because there's advantages to that. But I'm saying if your listeners that you've got are looking for something where they're going to be adding the value and doing something where they're going to be able to put out some of their cash or all of their cash at the back end, they've got to be looking at completely the opposite to what looks good from an investor's perspective. And again, that is empty buildings, derelict buildings, non-cash flowing properties, problematic properties. So we talked about solving problems. The more complex the problem, the less people are interested in it. So we've solved many complex problems, and you get better at solving them as you go along, and you get quicker at solving them. So yeah, that's what I would look for. I'd also look at, really this is a time where you need to be focused on trying to find a deal and trying to find actually where the motivation is for the vendor, even though there's not much motivation at the minute, but you will find people that are motivated in one way, shape or form. So before the motivation was, debt, divorce, death. Now the motivation is more, I'm just going to give you an example here. Maybe I've got a cladding issue. Maybe I've got, things where they're relevant to today's problems is what you need to focus on. So I'm just saying, look for problems today rather than the problems that we generally look for, which is the 3Ds. That's not what's causing the pressure at the minute for people to sell.
Yeah. Okay. And that's a really, really good advice. And it was interesting that you bought this one once it had failed to sell at auction. I think a lot of people that I speak to who are maybe new to this are frustrated because they go into the auction room and, they've done the sums and they've written down on a bit of paper or whatever, they know what they can pay for a property. And that's here. And the actual price it achieves is kind of somewhere up here. So do you think it's really essential to kind of keep an eye on those properties that are not selling, the ones that are failing perhaps once or twice, and looking at those and trying to assess what the problems are and whether or not they can be fixed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the top tip is always look at failed auction lots. Don't just go looking at general available properties at auction, because you're going to be spending a lot of resource, time, effort trying to basically read the legal packs, do the viewings, figure out basically your numbers, and then essentially you're going to get to a position where it just doesn't stack up for you price wise, and probably going to go over what your max bid is before you even start to bid. So yeah, we've learned that lesson quite early on in 2020. I'd say probably June time we started to bid again on auction properties. We bought one or two, but we weren't very successful as we were 2018-19, for example. And then we basically started to just follow the model of look at unsold lots. Simple as that.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Well, look, we could talk all day. You know, I love
Yeah.
talking to you like this, so it's amazing. And look, thank you for sharing this project. It was a very quick overview. Obviously, with the article that we did in the magazine, as we do with all of them, we go into a lot more depth about it in the fuller sort of recording, which is available for anybody who subscribes to Your Property Network magazine. All of our articles and the audio recordings are all loaded onto the app and in the hard copy magazines as well. So if anybody's looking to watching this thinking, you know what, maybe now is the time that I should be looking at property as a vehicle, and there are different ways of doing it, more creative strategies. It's all in the pages of YPN. So get along to yourpropertynetwork.co.uk/subscribe. That's yourpropertynetwork.co.uk/subscribe. You get your first copy completely free of charge and access to the app and hundreds of hours of recordings and audio recordings and webinars and so forth. So Saif, it's been really, really good to talk to you today. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to catching up with you and hearing about more of your projects soon. Thank you.
Cheers.